Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show. Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Behind the books, honest voices, real stories. I'm Amy Shannon, and each episode brings you heartfelt conversations and the storytellers behind the stories, authors, publishers, and creatives who shape the literary world. It's the second Sunday of the month. Welcome to Storytime for all ages. Today, we have an author with us. Please introduce yourself.
Well, hello there. My name is Will Hackett-Jones. I'm of British extraction, but I haven't lived there for a while. And I've got a website, willhj.com, where you can find out about me. And I've written a little book called The Old Wooden House, which I proudly present as the most boring book ever written, with solely one aim, which is to put children to sleep so that they don't reach the end of the book.
That is wonderful. I love it. I honestly, I read the book and I was like, most boring book. And then, I just think, I remember when my kids were little, trying to get them to sleep, and they liked stories and songs, and especially stories where, I made up stories and they were the main characters, but sometimes it's like, read me another one, and I'm like,
well, of course, that's the thing, isn't it? It's always that, can I have another one bit? And, it is lovely. I have fond memories of when I was little and Dad and Mum used to read to us. And of course I love doing it myself, for my little girl, but you also as a parent need a bit of time to yourself. And I just sort of thought, I was actually trying to get her to go to sleep on a plane, and this story just popped into my head. So I call it boring, but I guess really that a more accurate description would be that it's a warm, cozy sort of story that lulls them into a sort of hypnotic, comfortable, happy place.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's one of those things that it's kind of like you're sitting on their bed and, they're curled up to you and you're reading the book, and next thing you look down and they're asleep. And the trick is getting out of the bed without them knowing it. I always waited at least 5 or 10 minutes before I even dared to move. But I get that. Yeah, my boys loved story time. And then I have a son with special needs, and he has a twin brother, and his twin brother used to, I would hear him reading to him, and that was, it was just a nice thing to see. And then, of course, then I have to tuck them in and read them a story or sing them a song, and hopefully you don't get that again, please, again.
I don't know about you, but I've taken to getting up early and going to bed early, so I don't go to bed much later than my daughter, which means that, my wife and I have very little time together of an evening.
Right,
So I just sort of thought, well, and it's not the kind of book you read every day, but on particularly excited days, you can pull it out. And the whole story lasts about 15 minutes, and most kids are asleep by about 11 minutes in. The occasional, dedicated child might make it pretty much to the end, but most of them are asleep by sort of 10, 11 minutes in. And then you've got your evening to yourself, for a glass of wine, a film, or something else.
That's true. And I like how, in your book that, you would make notes to the parents, and then you even kind of told them how to slowly, get out of the bed, get off the bed, turn off the light or whatever when they were, leaving the room, and making sure the little one was still sleeping. Have your children ever got to the end of the book?
My daughter has, we've only got one so far. My daughter has a few times, but she's heard it quite a lot now.
And she would know if you skipped something.
Say again, sorry?
when I know some children, like parents, to hurry up, they'll like skip a page or a paragraph. And she knows that if you skip
Oh, they
something.
always know, don't they? Yeah, you can't get away with that. They always know. No, what I found actually, and this wasn't, I'd love to claim to be some kind of scientist and researcher and whatnot, but what I found is that the pauses that I put in are actually where the magic happens. And there are some, I suggest at times sort of 15-second pauses, which doesn't sound like much, but if you actually pause something 15 seconds, that's a heck of a long time when you're
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a story. And what happens is, I noticed this for myself years ago. I used to go to sleep listening to music, and I noticed after some time that I would slip off to sleep between tracks. And there's only a couple of seconds between a track on a CD or whatever.
right.
But it's that sudden sort of quiet between a song that you may like or may know, that allows your brain somehow to sort of slip under the surface of sleep, as it were. And so
Yeah.
when I was reading this, when I made it up to her on the plane, I left in pauses so that I could think of what to say next, but also just so that her brain could sort of switch off. And indeed that worked. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So when I tested it on various other kids, friends and family, I kept the pauses in, and it was really those that do the magic work. So the text leads the child to a warm, comfortable place. It's set in an apple orchard just outside an old wooden house in the countryside. But it's the pauses that allow them to switch off and not listen to the end. So that was an interesting sort of phenomenon.
That is. Have you written other children's books?
No, I never intended to write a children's book. I'm working on a big book, as I call it, an adult book. I've written it. It's about 100,000 words. But we were just on this plane. The child fell asleep to it. I tried it a few more times. We were visiting family in New Zealand. Tried it on various different kids with different sort of levels of energy, shall we say? And it worked basically every time. And I thought, hold on, if I'm self-publishing books and whatnot, maybe I should publish this as a book before my main one sort of comes out, and learn a bit about the whole business. So I did, and they're wonderful. I get reviews in from parents, which are just delightful. It's really nice to know that at a time when people can get exhausted and run out of sleep and tempers can fray and whatnot, I'm slightly helping, make families a bit happier, I suppose.
Oh, I think that just it's true. I mean, it's in, I never thought of, publishing any of my children's books. I just wrote for my kids, excuse me, when they were little. Recently I wrote a children's book and did the graphics and stuff like that, and I tested it out. My kids aren't little, but they love the story, especially even though they're adults. When I read it to them, they're like, "Read it to us." So I read it to them, and then
That's really sweet.
And I asked around relatives. I'm like, "Do you have any grandchildren that might like to read this book?" And just to see how, they like it. And so I just kind of published it. And I mean, my books have always been more focused on adults, and now I'm switching over to doing historical nonfiction, especially local fiction, or nonfiction, excuse me. But there's always that, and I read a lot of children's books just as a reviewer, but
Well, of course, yes.
they're so incredible that every time I read it, I'm like, God, another adult needs to read this book too, and I just think that it's so important. I think if they read children's books, even if they have say trouble reading, where they can't read, or they can only read at a certain grade level, and they're an adult. Unfortunately, a lot of adults were able to graduate high school and not read above 5th grade or 8th grade.
Wow, that's amazing.
And it's very, I'm a big advocate for literacy, and I always, whether you can or you can't read, learn how to read for one, and maybe even if you can read just a little bit, you can learn to read a little bit better. And it's not just so you can read another story, but your life. I think it can change the way a person perceives their life some people are ashamed that they can't read and they try to hide it. Like, oh, I
Yeah,
don't have my glasses on,
for
or
as old as time, yeah.
yeah, and they make up excuses. And when I used to have a great uncle who could not read, and I remember being 10, and I just like, Mom, why can't he read? And she just explained, their childhood, and farming was more important than education. And I couldn't grasp the concept of someone not being able to read, but he could drive. And
Of course. Seems so, yeah.
And here I'm 10 years old, but, obviously signs and recognition, but you would think that there was something he could read. He didn't. He couldn't even read his name. He had to use an X and then a witness.
Wow.
And some forms still have that. Like, if you're filling out a form, if you have to have an X, you have to have a witness to prove you are who you are, because everybody's going to sign their name with an X.
Yeah, it's quite amazing in this day and age. Yeah, I had a very interesting thing. So I'm a bit old for a first child. I'm 46 now, and my daughter's 6. And, I hadn't been anywhere near my children's books for 30 odd years, I suppose, more than. And unfortunately, our childhood home was sold when I was in my 20s. So a lot of stuff just sort of went into storage.
Yeah.
And, being a bookish family, when we were back visiting the UK, I went to the storage unit and dug out a whole load of boxes of old books that I grew up reading. In the end, they smell a bit musty, but they're a lot of them are sort of the great classics, 20th century children's book classics. So I brought them a batch of them back for my daughter to read with her in English, and it's absolutely fascinating as an adult to look back at these books. What you remember from them. Sometimes you might remember a bit of the story, very often not. But most of all, I don't even remember the pictures, like consciously, but I feel an extreme familiarity with them when I look at them.
Yeah.
And it fades obviously after a few readings, but that initial moment of opening a book you haven't seen in 30 years, and you just know those pictures. It was quite surreal. But yes, no, we do a lot of reading and enjoy it thoroughly.
Oh yeah, I'm a big reader, and I have boxes of books because I have no room. My shelves are full, but even that, like, I can understand, because I'll go back and read books that I grew up on. I read the entire Little House on the Prairie series. And then I remember when I read that when I was a kid, and then my one son, when he was in elementary school, they had where you could buy the books from Scholastic, and I saw that they had that set. I'm like, oh, I've got to buy this set. And my son was so proud that he was going to school. He was buying a book, or the book set. I had picked out a few books for him, but he was buying one that was for his mom. And he had to tell everybody about it. My mom loves it. So, he was so excited to bring that home and just, and share with his friends that, oh yeah, Mom read this. And I even read it I read it again and again. And I couldn't get enough. My dad, he bought me all the books that had to do when she was an adult. And even now I'm reading some of the books that were written about her child growing up. So I thought it was really, it just brings me back. And, I read, Beverly Cleary and Judy Blume.
Mm-hmm.
Even, Dr. Seuss, and I introduced my
Mm-hmm.
kids to that,
Yeah, well, mine's reading Dr. Seuss's sort of books and similar ones at the moment, and it's lovely to see her English reading fluency, improve. It's only a little bit behind her Russian,
Oh.
so yeah, that's really exciting.
So, are you saying she speaks multiple languages, or I'm just?
Yes, her
Oh,
mother's Russian, and
oh,
I'm English, so she's growing up bilingual.
well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That no, that I heard that children who when you're younger, it's easier to learn a second or a different language than when you're adults. It's more difficult. So,
Oh,
uh,
much easier, much, yeah.
yeah,
My parents sort of experimented with me when I was quite young. So by the time I was 13, I could speak 4 languages. And the tragic thing is I started learning Russian when I was 14, and the brain basically stops absorbing language around the 12, 13 sort of age.
yeah,
So it becomes suddenly a lot harder to learn a language after 13. So I started Russian, one of the harder languages, once my brain had changed. No, obviously nobody told me this at that time. I found this out later. And I couldn't work out why I couldn't just, absorb it like I'd
right,
absorb the other languages. I actually had to put effort into it, which is a terrible disappointment.
yeah. So you hope that certain things come easy, especially when you really want to learn something, and then you're like, and sometimes it's a lot harder, as an adult to learn something. I see
Yeah,
myself as a lifetime learner, but it's not always easy. Sometimes, because I have a disability from an injury 20 years ago, that
yeah.
sometimes I have to relearn something or train my brain to remember something that, like reading, or because a lot of times I'll read my own stuff and I'm like, oh, really? I forgot about that. So, but yeah, it's so, I can't get enough of, saying how it's just important that our children and our children's children, even though my children's babies are all covered with fur,
Yeah.
that, yeah, I'm a grandmother to fur babies, so I love
Mm.
it. But even like the calming of your voice, and when I talk to my pets or my grandbabies, and I get my voice gets excited, and then they get excited,
Hmm.
and I tell my kids, I'm like, well, you're not giving me grandchildren, so this is what you're gonna deal with. But
You
I love
mentioned
it.
continuous learning, and you also mentioned that you illustrated some of the children's books that you'd written. Did you illustrate them yourself, or you worked with an artist?
The only one that I published is called What Am I? I illustrated myself. I did sketches. I did graphics on the computer
Oh, wow.
and some other things. The sketches are all kind of, the illustrations are all different, but my story is, or it's, I said it's called What Am I? It's
Mm.
this cat that has extremely long ears, like a bunny, like a floppy
Mm.
bunny. And he doesn't know, his mother and brothers don't want anything to do with him because he's different. And they told him he's not a cat.
Mm.
he meows, but he goes on an adventure after their previous owner just stuck them all in the box and wrote the word free on it. So when a kid came around, he saw the normal looking cat and her kittens and took them because it said free, and he was very excited that he said the word free. So the other cat was left behind because he's always tripping over his ears, and his family made fun of him, and so he thinks his name is Free. His box, yeah, for a while he thinks his name is Free, and then he's in this cardboard box that gets destroyed. Then he runs into a dog because he's black and white, so he runs into a dog thinking he's a dog, and then he realizes he's not a dog, and then he thinks that he runs into a rat because the rat wants to go through this place's garbage, and it's a place where they have fish. So the cat is looking to eat fish, but their encounter, since he doesn't realize that they're supposed to be enemies, they're like, are you going to eat me? He's like, no, why are you going to eat me? And then later he comes face to face with a bunny. And then he realizes he's not a bunny. And then he finds a human. And one of the other distinct things about him is that he has two different colored eyes. And the human he finds is a little girl who has the same colored eyes. And he thinks that his home is always going to be in some kind of box. And then he finds out who he truly is, what he truly is, and that he's a good kitty. And I couldn't find any kind of images I did a search for cats with long ears, and it just looked wrong. They had like really big ears that stuck up, so I sketched what I thought he would look like. And I used the sketch, and I did different poses. When I had my cousin's son, my aunt's grandchild, when I sent her the book, and he read it, and he said his favorite part was the pictures of the cat.
Oh, lovely.
Through. And I thought, well, thank you very much, because it just made me feel good, because they're all, different. It wasn't the same illustrations, and they were different. And it's just about, a poor animal, because he was different. Just like, kids, if they're different, they're, people kids pick on them, or sometimes adults do, they don't like when when their children are different or not like they expect them to be.
Yeah, such is the way, I suppose. So that's interesting, because I've never been able to draw in my life. Even as a kid, it looked terrible. As an adult, it looks like a spider got drunk and crawled across the page. But I've actually started taking drawing lessons literally just last week, because I've realized that a future book project, which I want to link with an art project, will require me to at least be able to sketch. And so I'm back in the complete learner's seat again. I found a young student who's teaching me.
That's actually good. I can do abstract very well. But it had, drawing this cat, I was looking at different cats and bunnies and trying to figure out, and then I got it, and I'm like, and then the cover, I actually painted on canvas the cat, and then I used that for the cover. And then the sketches I scanned in, and so it was fun to do that. I have some other children's stories that I've been writing about our two cats that we have, but I haven't figured out the illustrations yet. yeah, drawing a fake cat and then drawing a real one, that's not the same thing.
No, well, of course you can apply your imagination to that. If it looks different to normal cats,
Yeah,
can't have anything.
I know. I've seen, you never know what you're going to find. I mean, just because you've never seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, especially in
Mm.
someone's imagination.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But nowadays, I think that is so important, um, for that, for kids to still have the imagination. You know, some kids are stuck with the screens and phones and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But when we were growing up, my kids had a computer, but they could only use it where I could see and at certain times. But
Mm.
I liked it when they played. You know, they went outside, they made up games. Sometimes I didn't like the games they made, but it was all part of imagination.
Yeah. No,
Um,
it's vital. It's vital that they create. We as beings are creative beings. All of us, even those who claim to, not be. We all are, and I feel it, and I'm sure everyone does. If you just consume stuff, I love watching a film, but if you watch 6 films in a row, your brain's exhausted because it's not done any creating. Even reading is a creation because you're not completely passively absorbing like you are in a film. You're creating imagery in your mind.
exactly. And that's what I like to do. I mean, sometimes I just sit on my bed, curl up with a good book and just play some music in the background, whatever I'm interested in. Lately, it's been a lot of Elvis Presley, but just because
Mm,
he reminds me of my dad. He's end stage dementia, so
right.
the hardest thing for me to uh, like they go through so many different stages, and he's actually living longer than they expected him to. But he was a genius. I mean, literally, he had a very high IQ, and he
Mm.
was a reader. He just could read everything, and he was like our version of Google. So we would be like, I'd be like, Dad, we talk about something, and if he didn't know the answer, he would go to the library or buy a book,
Mm, mm,
an actual book, and read. And and that was something that we would do. We would trade books that we've read. He loved biographies and poetry, and he loved it when I wrote poetry and gave him the books. I had one paperback that whenever we went out, he would fold it and put it in his back pocket so he could read it in the car.
really? That's lovely.
Yeah. um, so in this past July, the book that I did with poetry, I had found a bunch of writings that my dad did when I've been going through all this paperwork. This was a lot of paperwork.
Mm.
And I found a folder that had some of his poetry and some essays and stories. So I redid the one book and added my dad's to it and then republished it with
Mm.
me and my dad, so as his legacy, uh, it won't be forgotten. I mean, and this is stuff that no one else ever read. I shared it with my uncle. He's like, I didn't know your father could write like this. I'm like, well, then you
Mm.
should have known him better because I
Mm.
did. Whenever somebody said, oh yeah, I didn't know that. And I'm like, why? You talk to him, then you know.
Yeah, my dad's got dementia now as well, and
It is
he's also
horrible.
ticking along despite numerous sort of infections and this, that, and the other. He's still there, and he could have written, I think, if he'd set his mind to it. He had a very good way with words.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although I recognise it in myself sometimes. A lot of it's quite, um, addressing an in-group, as it were, of people, so you have to know all the in-jokes to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
My
and
dad was like that.
and
He
that's wonderful to be part of a club, but if you actually want anyone to read your stuff, you have to at least decode it for them somehow. So that's what
exactly.
you can do.
I know when my dad was he had a heart surgery, and before he was always like he was never social. He didn't tell stories about his childhood. I knew that he wrote, and I knew that he wrote poetry, and I read some of his poetry, but after the anesthesia did something to make, like, it opened up a part of his brain where he would talk nonstop about stories and just tell stories, and I was like, oh, this is the best version of my dad I ever had. And eventually it faded, and then things just
Mm.
progressed from that. But I am so fortunate that I had that when,
Mhm.
before he started, when he was losing his memories, he stopped knowing how to read. And this is a man that I was sending
Yeah.
magazines to and newspapers, and he was really good at faking when he couldn't do something. Like, if he knew he couldn't do something, he was really good at faking it. So he would have a newspaper and pretend he was reading it.
Mm.
But he also, anything that he actually could read, and when he was finished, he would hand out to other residents. So if they were able to read, they would be able to read too. He didn't want what he read just to be what he read. So he would
Mm.
share it. And I thought that was just, I was like, doesn't surprise me, but it made me very proud that he was doing something like that.
Mm.
And yeah, dementia is one of those diseases when it's going slow. It's not something that, it's hard to explain unless you know it. You know what I
It is
mean?
very hard to explain. I don't live in the UK, so I would see my dad sort of once a year when I went back. And talking to my stepmother, she'd say he's not very well and this and that. And then I'd go back, this is a couple of years ago, and he would seem fine. We'd chat about this and that and memories and whatnot, and he'd seem fine to me. And I didn't quite know what she meant.
Yeah,
And then one day she sort of came downstairs and said, "This is really interesting because he sort of picks up for a bit when you visit, and his memory seems to be working again, but it doesn't last long. And once you're gone, it sort of disappears again." Anyway, so one day I sort of thought, I have a YouTube channel and got to using cameras and microphones and whatnot.
hmm,
And I sort of thought maybe I should interview him because he always, when I was growing up, he always had a whole load of largely unprintable stories, but a lot of fun. And I thought, maybe I should interview him and get some of these recorded because,
yeah,
my daughter doesn't know him very well. She's only seen him a few times. And so I sat him down to record, and I'd gone through all the stories I could remember as sort of made notes to use them as prompts. And that was when I realized that my stepmother wasn't exaggerating, it was real. He just couldn't remember most of his all-time favorite stories. Not with
yeah,
a subtle hint, with a slightly more obvious hint he would, but then he couldn't relate it the way he always used to, amusingly and, with timing and all that sort of thing.
yeah,
And that, it's so weird to see, because it's the same person it would seem, but their brain is just different.
yeah. It's kind of like they're in this shell eventually, which is their
Mm,
body.
mm.
And my dad, his biggest thing is he doesn't remember that he can't walk. So
Oh,
he
right. Ooh,
tries, and he's broken so many bones,
really?
and they try to splint them, and he obviously can't have surgery to fix them, so his bones aren't healing like they're supposed to,
Mm,
and he's at the point where he's getting agitated all the time. So if they put a sling on him, he'll take it off and throw it at the nurse.
Yeah.
Or he'll just start stripping in the middle of the dining room. And I get the call. I'm the oldest, so I take care of my dad, and I'm glad that I can do it. The last I saw him, the second to the last time I saw him, for a brief moment, he knew who I was, and he told me he loved me, and I asked him if I could hug him, and he said yes, and then I took his picture, and he smiled at me, and that's what I go back to, because when I went back a month later, nothing. It was like, who the heck are you? And for a while, the only thing that he had that he could remember was that he was a fan of, he's a big Yankees fan and a New York Giants fan. So he wore T-shirts and shirts that, hats that had to do with the sport. But now even the sports is gone. So he's not even who he was, but for some reason he's as stubborn as he was when he had his mind working right. So, but I cherish those moments with him, talking about books, and and it goes back to even when I was a kid. When I was really really little, he would make up stories, and my mom would do that too. She would write stories and read them to all of us. I'm oldest of 5. And it was like we couldn't wait. And then if she got to the point where she stopped writing, I'm like, Mom, hurry up and write. And as Dad just he changed so many times. There were so many different versions of him, but it's just not easy. And like when I heard that, he couldn't read anymore, I just thought, God, I don't know what I would do if I couldn't read anymore. And the fact that he knew he couldn't read anymore, knowing that you're declining rather than being oblivious, I think it's worse. I guess I would rather be oblivious to know that I'm losing my mind or whatever than know that I can do it. Yeah.
I did ask Dad if he'd read anything, interesting recently, and he said he was aware of this. He said, no, I can't read anymore. I read a paragraph, I've forgotten what happened at the beginning, forgotten what book I'm reading, and it's just frustrating and pointless now.
Yeah, and I think even with with this, it shows, I think it's another reason for people who can read to do it, and people who don't know how to read, learn how to read.
Well, it's always the way, isn't it? If you don't have a problem, then everything seems easy and obvious and fine. But as soon as you do,
exactly.
If you have some sort of, I had an operation a while ago, and for a while, physical limitations on this and that. And suddenly just being able to walk normally without any pain or whatever is such a privilege, I suppose. But of course, it's impossible to know that until you've lost it, isn't it? It's
it is.
You grow up with what is normal, and it's very hard to sort of imagine not being able to do this thing.
I know it's been very difficult for me. I had a head injury from domestic violence 20 years ago, and over the years, it progressed into a neurological disorder, which makes my body parts just do whatever they want. Spasms, seizures, awake seizures, which are the worst because you're aware of what's going on. But, sometimes I have to write, or I can't walk very well, but I still write. I still let myself write. I still read and do my best to, help authors get their stories out. Because I think it's important. Some people are like, oh, I'm not much of a reader. Why not? Readers, what, some people, I don't know why you can read whatever you want. I don't care if it's a magazine, a comic book, or graphic novel, or whatever. If you can read, that takes you to a place from just wherever you're sitting. You could be, reclining on the sofa or recliner and reading, and you just kind of go on a journey. And
It's
whether,
one of the most delightful things, like when you can find a book that really hooks you, and if you're lucky enough to have the time to spend a few days intensively reading it, I mean, you just, I saw some internet meme recently about reading a book is so weird because you sit and stare at slices of tree for hours on end and hallucinate vividly. And I just thought that's so real, I'm not really into fantasy novels, but I've read a few, and this entire world sort of builds up in your head. It's scrappy. It's not entirely complete, but you can see it. You can see the stuff happening.
yeah.
It's such a pleasure, such a joy.
I know. I love going back to read some of the classics. I'm a big fan of Shakespeare. Whitman's my favorite poet, and Edgar Allan Poe, and I just love that. Recently, an author who I was like a big fangirl over. He's an international best-selling author, and he told me that my reviews sometimes are better than the actual book. And then he said that my writing reminded him of when Edgar Allan Poe would write book reviews. And I knew Poe wrote book reviews, but I had never seen any of them. I just knew that he did. But he said that my style was very similar to that because it was helping the author tell their story through a review. So I think that is very important. So
yeah, I wanted to thank you for doing these. I don't know if you have any idea how hard it is to get somebody to review your book. There are paid services, of course, but I've contacted probably around 100 book reviewers, people, Instagram and X and whatnot. And I had 2 replies, and one of them was yours. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And the other one was somebody saying I don't review self-published books. And, I just like, if people are book, I know they probably get a lot, but the least they could do is just say no thanks. That's it. I don't need a explanation or anything, but just a polite no thanks. That's all.
Exactly.
I just some kind of response. But out of nearly 100 messages sent, I got 2 replies.
Yeah, I completely understand. I try to do my best because I can only write one review per book, and if I have more contacts with publishers and authors and publicists than reviewers, because reviewers seem to come and go. But this is my 11th year doing it, and I told my I call them my authors. Anyone I've reviewed for, you are now my author. And because I see it as a community. And anytime someone needs help or they have a question about, publishing, or they want me to read something to see if it's any good, or, or suggestions, I get all that, and I don't mind. I love it. And I also, I do promotions, and editing and other things for authors, and I do it based off their budget. Started out just reading books from self-published authors in a time where it was still like, oh, you're self-published, and then you call it indie author, and it just sounds a little bit better, but people still know what that is. And yes, some people will publish a book that is not worth the paper it's written on, but there are so many others that I read that I'm so amazed, especially when it's like their debut novel. It's like, wow, you actually care. I could tell by reading someone's story, doesn't matter what it is, of their passion behind what they wrote. And when I can tell that, then I know that that book was worth reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm working on a big book, as I said, which I thought would come out, I would bring out in December, but I've been writing it in Russian, which, frankly, writing in your not your native language is insane, and nobody should do it. But I went and did it for no
Well, if you
particular.
ever have it translated to English, send it to me. I'd be glad to read it and review it for you.
Oh, absolutely will. I hadn't intended to, but I've spoken to a number of friends in the UK and the US who all say they think that I should publish it in English too. And as I spent the last 15 years being a translator from Russian to English, then I guess I'll translate my own book once I've finished it.
Yeah. So let me know.
I will send it to you, certainly. Yeah.
I definitely would love to have you back on the show. And also, if after the show, if you could send me your address, I'd love to gift my children's book to your daughter.
Oh, that would be really sweet.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to wrap up here, and thank you again for being on the show. This was just a great episode, and it's the end of another great conversation. Thank you for being on the show, and thank you, audience, for listening. If you wish for you or your book to be on the show, just go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast and schedule your pre-recording. Please follow this podcast on Spotify. I'm Amy Shannon. Be safe, be well, and always be kind.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.